Good morning and welcome to all my friends to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. As you can see, we've got a most glorious full moon this morning down here at Darling Harbour, and it's Thursday. It's going to be a wonderful day from what I can see, and hopefully we can position ourselves tonight to make the most of tonight's version of the full moon. For those of us who are looking forward to seeing the August moon, last night we were sadly disappointed because there was lots of cloud, lots of rain, lots of lightning and lots of thunder which made it impossible for anybody to enjoy the spectacle of the full moon here in Sydney. The other good news that I have to share with everybody is that yesterday was the 8th day of my granddaughter, my youngest daughter's birth. She was born last Wednesday after a number of years of both Will and Artie trying to have and start their family. And yesterday, as I said, was the 8th day, and the 8th day has great significance within the Christian context. And the 8th day is calculated by taking the first day that a child is born. So she was born on a Wednesday, and Wednesday, the day she was born, is day one of her life, and then you count 8 days. So on the 8th day, which is the Wednesday, a week after she was born, the Greek Orthodox have a most beautiful tradition, a beautiful custom, where they take their newborns to church, and the newborn is given their name. It's a naming ceremony, a naming service, whereby the father of the child, or the godfather to be, or the grandparents take the child into the church, and the priest will read a special service and will dedicate and name the child. So my granddaughter yesterday was named and dedicated to the Panagia, the Most Holy. It's one of the names that the Virgin Mary carries, one of the many names, one of the many titles that she carries. And Panagia actually means most holy, the most holy, the greatest of all holy people. So baby will carry the name, the Christian name of Panagia, as she was dedicated to the Panagia. Both Will and Artie did travel to Dinos. Will, to his credit, got on his hands and knees and crawled all the way up from the port to the church, lit a candle, and I would imagine would have hoped and prayed that one day they would get to start their family. And this great gift of God was offered to them in the form of a baby girl that was born last Wednesday, who, as I mentioned before, was dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and will be called or named Panagia, and also known as Poppy on a day-to-day basis. What I wish to do now is go on a walk and talk about a book summary like I normally and traditionally do on Jim's 5am Club. And this book summary is entitled Take a Walk Around the Block. and it's by an author known as Spike Carlson. Take a walk around the block, and this book is all about everyday things that sustain us, the wonders, the modern wonders of the world that we often take for granted. But this author is able to detail what these wonders are and to remind us how lucky we are to live in a world that has been transformed positively by technologies, and to understand how man interacts with those wonders and how those wonders interact with mankind. The author goes on to say, to kick off the book summary and to put it all into context, that it turns out that the story of things isn't so much about things as it is about people and their triumphs, their failures, their obsessions, and their brilliance. It's about how things affect us and how we affect things. So the author, as I say, has identified 26 wonders of the modern world, but he focuses on, in this book summary, just the top 3, so that we can just go through and just pick out 2 or 3 to talk about. And if you want to find out a little bit more, then obviously you can go and learn a bit more by getting the book. But the first one, the first miracle of technology, the first miracle of modern man that has had a significant impact on my generation, and I guess to a certain extent my parents' generation as well, is the modern phone. The modern phone, what we know as a cell phone, has increased the speed of information and communication from a million seconds to just 0.0053 seconds, which represents a 200 million times improvement. So just think of it, that the modern phone, the thing that I'm holding here, and makes it possible for me on a daily basis to deliver a vlog, to deliver a video message that is captured, downloaded, and shared on YouTube and on the internet. That happens almost instantaneously. And as we said, I can just myself communicate and engage and touch billions of people potentially, because my message is uploaded to a platform, and then that platform is available to whoever can access that platform via the internet, which incidentally is, billions of people. And it can be done really, really quickly, really efficiently, and really cheaply as well. So the world has changed, the world has opened up, and one person, just one influencer, one person can connect with and influence in a positive and a negative way, I may add, millions and billions, lots and lots of people, and do it quickly. So just think of it, where we've come from in the past, 1,000 or 2,000 years. There was once a time whereby, in order to send a message over land, the only way you could do it is by foot, is by just starting to walk, and you get to where you want to get to, and you share your information, you share your the detail of what you want to do. For example, in the days of Jesus and just after that, St. Paul and all of the disciples, the apostles, would basically need to walk to wherever they had to go and to talk. And where he'd go to, he would write epistles and leave written information there, or he would send it via a messenger where somebody else would take it to a community in order to clarify things or in order to make things good again. So what the author here is saying is that we've come from a place where things happened really, really slowly. Whenever a message, whenever a meeting, whenever an ending had to happen, people needed to travel by land, and most of the time they would travel by foot. And then we had some technology kick in. We had the ability, where possible, to travel on a horseback, which would make things a little bit faster, but not significantly faster. Then we had a thing called signal telegraphy, signaling telegraphy, where people, say on the Great Wall of China, would light fires, and that fire would have a chain reaction, and then others would light fires, and that message, whatever it is, would travel hundreds of kilometres relatively quickly, a lot more quicker than what it would have been by messenger or horseback. But after that, another innovation was the messaging pigeon, where you would tie a message to a homing pigeon's foot and let it go, and it would travel to a castle or travel back to where it would normally go and take a message, and then you just read that message and have another carrier pigeon to respond. Once again, it wasn't always guaranteed that the pigeon would get to where it was intended to go, as hawks and other things, storms, would sometimes intercept or cease that message's promulgation. Then we had a thing called optical telegraph, where you'd have people with flags on outposts that would communicate with each other by a series of flags. You'd have telegraph, which is Morse code, which once again slowly got quicker and better. Then we had switchboards, and finally we had the cell phones or the mobile phones, which had a significant impact on the speed of communication and on the accuracy of communication, of spreading the good word, but also spreading misinformation and disinformation as well. So we live in a world now where we've got lots of influencers, lots of platforms where everybody can share their opinion, regardless of whether their opinion is good or bad. There is that ability and that platform for people to get on the bandwagon or create a bandwagon, regardless of whether or not it's the right message and the right bandwagon. The second glorious invention that the author talks about that has changed our lives is concrete, believe it or not. Concrete is everywhere, and it's been around for thousands of years, so much so that concrete was first devised about 10,000 years ago. Concrete constitutes about half of everything that was built and that we build today, and it was perfected about 2,000 years ago, should I say, about 2,500 years ago. It was perfected by the Romans. But believe it or not, the formula, was lost for about 1,000 years. So it was perfected by the Romans. It was used to build some magnificent structures like the Pantheon, which houses the biggest unreinforced dome in the world. And that formula was lost for almost 1,000 years. And it was only in 1414 that a Swiss monastery actually came across the formula to create concrete, which was in a book, and they used that and they rediscovered the beauty of concrete. Concrete, interestingly enough, wasn't aware of this, contributes between 4 and 8% of CO2 emissions, and there are about 140 million tonnes of concrete recycled every year. But they are making breakthroughs, they are making improvements in terms of how concrete is created to make it more efficient, more effective, and more environmentally friendly. So once again, concrete, something that we take for granted, something that is significant, has actually changed our environment. And some will say in a positive way, others will say in a negative way. But could you imagine Sydney? Could you imagine Sydney if it was still in the hands of the Indigenous Australians? There would be nothing here. There would be no structures here, one would imagine. And it's this progress that this country has been able to experience and express has come with the knowledge transfer that came with all the wonderful migrants that came from the many lands to make this place their home and to work, to have progress, to have vision, and to contribute to the fabric that is now called Australia, one of the most diverse, one of the most multicultural countries that the world has ever seen, an experiment that has actually worked and worked brilliantly. So concrete, as you can see, concrete, glass, these things we make and take for granted have transformed this land form, this land, into something which is spectacular, functional, and can house and support a lot more people than would have been able to be here if not for white settlement, if not for the work, the contribution of all of the migrants. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people say that, and the Aboriginals or the Indigenous Australians claim that they are the longest living culture in the world. But you've got to ask yourself, what did that 60,000 years of their culture amount to? Now, what I find hard to understand is that a culture can be in this wonderful land for 60,000 years or more, and yet the population didn't grow significantly. Now, why after 60,000 years, when white settlement got here, were there less than 1 million, closer to 500,000, which is the claim of Indigenous people? Why wouldn't this land sustain and enable millions, hundreds of millions of Indigenous Australians to be roaming this continent? Now, what happened to all those people before white Australians got here? Now, that's the big question that I can't quite fathom mathematically. It just doesn't make sense that you can be here for hundreds of generations and yet not grow, your population, and not have any evidence of progress. And yet in other countries in Europe, there is significant sort of evidence of great civilizations. And within this book alone, we hear that concrete was used and invented 10,000 years ago, and has been used, and the Romans perfected it and did wonderful things with it and built communities and basically grew empires through the technologies that they had available to them, that they're able to use for goodness, to create progress and to make the world a better place. Anyway, the last point from this book, the last technology that the author talks about in our walkabout, is the traffic light. How the traffic light has transformed the way we live, and once again it gets taken for granted. And traffic lights, the traffic light system, and I can see a traffic light right over there in the distance. I don't know if you can see that green light over there, but those traffic lights go on orange and then it will cycle to red, of course. Those traffic lights cost an absolute bomb. Very, very, very expensive, and yet they enable our lives to go on and for us to function efficiently and effectively. And the lights have been able to save lots of accidents, save lots of time, and to change our lives. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. There's a few more things here that in terms of traffic lights. The first traffic light was invented and implemented in 1868 in London. Car production increased from 2,500 to 500,000, and with that, accidents and deaths increased exponentially as well, if not for the traffic lights to help keep people out of harm's way. There's a thing called the speed by 10, the 10% rule. So if you want to find out how a traffic light works, you basically take the speed limit divided by 10, and that will show you the phasing in terms of how long it takes to change from red to green, or red to orange to green. Traffic lights, interestingly, all go to red. There's a red phase which keeps from 1.5 seconds to 3 seconds, and the longest that you'll be held at a traffic light, I think, is around about 4 minutes from what the author here is saying. And we've also got trigger induction loops in the road, which will trigger the lights based on the traffic and the amount of traffic. And also something that I wasn't quite aware of is that a lot of traffic lights these days have bogus buttons. You can go and press the button, but it doesn't do anything because the light's all automatic. You may think that you're pressing the button so you can cross the road, but all of that is pre-programmed and automatic. There are only a few light buttons that actually work, and depending on how many people press it will determine the duration that it will be available and open up to. And when you're crossing the road, you basically get 5 to 10 seconds to cross the street, and traffic lights these days also have a countdown to let you know when they're about to change back to no crossing, and for when cars are allowed to start driving. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. Once again, we've been through a book, learnt something new. Hopefully it was as interesting for you as what it was for me, and that we can learn something and incorporate it into our daily lives, and something that we can pass on to our children, and something that we can help us understand this world that we live in just a little bit better. Take care, have a good day, and happy Thursday to all my friends. Yassas, and bye for now.